Long before Carthage rose to challenge the might of Rome, there was Tyre, the jewel of the Phoenicians. Perched on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, in what is today Lebanon, Tyre was a city unlike any other. Its harbor bustled with ships, its markets overflowed with treasures, and its merchants carried with them not just goods, but ideas, languages, and cultures that would ripple across the ancient world. To understand Carthage, we must first understand Tyre, the mother city that gave birth to this African empire. The Phoenicians were not an empire in the traditional sense. They did not conquer vast lands with great armies, nor did they rely on the iron fist of military domination. Instead, they built their influence through commerce, craftsmanship, and seafaring. From around the second millennium BCE, they became the Mediterranean's master traders, linking east and west in a vast network of exchange. They were the middlemen of antiquity, transporting silver from Spain, tin from Britain, cedar wood from Lebanon, spices from Arabia, ivory from Africa, and even luxury goods from as far as India. Their ships became floating marketplaces, carrying wealth and ideas to every port they touched. Tyre, in particular, stood at the heart of this network. The city was famous for its prized purple dye, extracted painstakingly from murex shells. So rare was this dye that it became the color of royalty, the mark of kings and emperors. Every thread dyed in Tyrian purple carried with it a sense of prestige, and Tyre controlled this trade with ruthless efficiency. The city's merchants grew wealthy, and its rulers ambitious. With wealth came the resources to expand, to push beyond the narrow strip of land in Lebanon, and establish colonies across the Mediterranean. But what drove Tyre to look westward? The Phoenicians lived in a narrow land squeezed between the mountains of Lebanon and the sea. Resources were limited, and their cities, Byblos, Sidon, and especially Tyre, depended on trade for survival. Expansion was not simply an option. It was a necessity. Colonies allowed Tyre to secure resources, anchor its trade routes, and create safe havens for its ships. Every colony was like a pearl strung on a necklace, each shining in its own right, but all linked back to the mother city. By the 9th century BCE, Tyre had already dotted the Mediterranean with settlements. Some were small trading posts, little more than harbors and warehouses. Others grew into full cities. From Cyprus in the east to Malta in the center, and across to North Africa and Spain, the Phoenicians established a network that spanned thousands of miles. They did not arrive as conquerors, but as negotiators. They often settled alongside local populations, bringing new technologies, goods, and gods, while adapting to the customs of the people they encountered. In this way, their influence spread not by the sword, but by the allure of commerce and cultural exchange. Among all these colonies, one would rise above the rest: Carthage. But Carthage was not Tyre's first outpost in North Africa. Earlier Phoenician settlers had already explored the coast, founding temporary trading stations where they exchanged goods with the indigenous Berber tribes. Carthage, however, was destined to be different. Its location, on a sheltered bay with access to fertile hinterlands and a natural harbor, made it a strategic gem. The Phoenicians understood its potential, but it was Queen Dido's flight from Tyre that transformed it from a trading post into a city of destiny. To truly appreciate Carthage's rise, we must look closer at Tyre itself. Archaeological discoveries paint a picture of a thriving urban center, with temples to Melkart, the city's patron god, and bustling workshops producing glass, metalwork, and luxury crafts. Tyre was a city of artisans and sailors, but above all, of merchants. The merchant was not merely a tradesman. He was a diplomat, a cultural ambassador, a risk-taker willing to face storms, pirates, and hostile shores in search of profit. It was this spirit that Tyre exported along with its colonies. And what of religion? The gods of Tyre would also find their way across the sea. Melkart, often compared by the Greeks to Heracles, was carried westward. Astarte, the goddess of fertility and love, was worshipped in new temples. These deities were more than spiritual guardians. They were symbols of identity, reminders of the homeland. For Phoenician colonists far from Lebanon, the rituals of their gods tied them to their roots, even as they blended with the traditions of new lands. In Carthage, these gods would take on new forms, shaping a unique Carthaginian religion that retained its Phoenician core. The Phoenicians were also pioneers of writing. Their alphabet, developed in the cities of the Levant, was revolutionary, simple, efficient, and adaptable. It was this script that would eventually inspire the Greek alphabet, and through it, the Latin one that we still use today. In many ways, every time we write, we carry with us a legacy of Tyre and the Phoenicians. Carthage, too, inherited this script, carving it into stone, inscribing it on pottery, and using it to keep records of trade and law. Trade, religion, writing, these were the pillars of Phoenician expansion, but there was also politics. Tyre was not a unified empire. It was a city that relied on its kings, councils, and merchant elites to balance interests. Colonies were not ruled directly, but they remained tied by kinship, religion, and shared profit. This loose but resilient system allowed Tyre's influence to endure, even as rival powers like Assyria and later Babylon rose in the Near East. While Tyre often bent under foreign pressure at home, its colonies far away, like Carthage, continued to thrive. In a sense, the hardships Tyre faced in the east only strengthened its westward focus. By the time Carthage was founded, the Phoenicians were already masters of the western Mediterranean. They had established footholds in Sicily, Sardinia, and southern Spain. They had learned to navigate the treacherous Strait of Gibraltar, venturing even beyond into the Atlantic. In their wake, they left not only trade goods but also cultural footprints. Archaeological remains show Phoenician pottery styles adopted by local peoples, Phoenician gods worshipped in foreign lands, and Phoenician technologies influencing agriculture and craftsmanship. Carthage was born into this vast world of exchange, inheriting the mantle of Tyre's far-flung ambitions. But Carthage would not simply remain a colony. Over time, the balance of power shifted. As Tyre suffered conquests and decline in the Near East, Carthage grew stronger. Its location in North Africa gave it access to fertile land for agriculture, something Tyre lacked. Its harbor became a hub for fleets that dominated trade routes. Slowly, Carthage began to act independently, forging its own destiny. The child would surpass the mother, and the legacy of Tyre would live on, magnified in Carthage. So when we speak of Carthage as Rome's great rival, we must remember it all began with Tyre, a city of merchants, sailors, and visionaries who looked westward across the sea and imagined something greater. The spirit of Tyre was carried by Queen Dido and her followers, by the merchants who risked everything for trade, and by the gods whose temples rose in new lands. Carthage was not an isolated miracle, but the flowering of a long tradition of Phoenician expansion. In our next journey, we will step deeper into this transformation, to see how Carthage's early settlers blended Phoenician traditions with North African realities. We will explore how Berber alliances, religious practices, and the fusion of cultures created something entirely new, a civilization both Phoenician and African, destined to shape history. Stay with us as we uncover the roots of Carthage, not only in legend but in the living legacy of Tyre.